Paul, I'm delighted to have you on the program for many, many reasons, but I will start with something that I don't often encounter. I encounter people all the time, Paul, who run for things. I rarely get a chance to talk to someone who came close to running for something, but then decided not to. And I'd love for you, if you're willing, to describe the process you went through, what was attractive to it in the initial exploration, and then how you went through the process personally and professionally to decide not to run for the Senate in Alabama.
Yeah, I'll start with an explanation of why I didn't do it. And the biggest concern I had and the biggest fear I had, Major, I was going to win and then would have to serve in Congress for at least 6 years. I say that jokingly, but the process was bewildering, and I'll take you through it as quickly as I can. I'll go back to August 26th. I was commuting at the time between Birmingham and Charlotte. Charlotte is where our studio is. My wife and I just bought a house in Birmingham, and I was asked to host an event for youth football safety. And I was hosting it with someone you may be familiar with, Coach Tommy Tuberville.
Right.
And I was thinking of a way to break the ice for the conversation at a local club in front of about 500 people. And I said, Coach Tuberville, I said, my wife and I just bought a house in Birmingham, and that means we have legal residency, something I don't know if you're familiar with. There's been a lot of conversation that he lives in Florida while serving as Alabama's representative.
Yes.
And I didn't give it. The next hour was a blur. We talked about football and talked about all the things that interest him in Washington. And on the way out of the event, I shook hands with somebody I knew, but there was a lot of people around. And the next day, I'm back in Charlotte doing our show, and I get a text from this guy. And I'll be a little careful how I describe it, but he said, you were great last night. It was fantastic. So and so and I, are so happy that you're back in Alabama. Final line of the text, Major. Do you want to run for the Senate? And I can be indecisive about big decisions, and I have for the rest of my life, which may be a month or maybe 25 years, I have no idea why I responded this way. I texted back, yes, thus beginning the most bewildering 3 months of my life. Within 5 minutes, I was being connected to other people. This was a major. This person is connected to a major person in Washington. I'll try not to be overly dramatic here, since you've dealt with all of them. By the end of the day, I had a conversation set up for the next. That was a Wednesday. On Friday, the football season was beginning. I landed in Atlanta for the first game. I went right to my hotel and spent an hour and a half on the phone with a major political operative who laid out the possibility of a campaign. I had not even registered to vote yet in Alabama, which I did immediately. And within 2 weeks, one of the top Washington political operatives and two of his colleagues showed up on my doorstep one night at 6 p.m. I did the show that day from my house, and we spent the next 4 hours mapping out the campaign. And we were off and running. For me, I'm a political junkie. I grew up in the shadows of Watergate. And they told me, I said, well, can I win? They said, absolutely. And they showed me how I was going to win.
Right.
They thought it was a particularly weak field. By the way, they had tried to get somebody else to run. I wasn't like the first choice.
Sure.
They had tried and failed to get Bruce Pearl, the basketball coach at Auburn, to run. He thought about it for a couple of months, bailed out. I mean, they were down to their last swing, and they found me.
And then why, ultimately, Paul, did you say no?
Being in this cauldron for 3 months, I saw the path. I dealt with donors. I dealt with a lot of people, and at various moments, and I'll get to the final reason in a minute, but they kept rushing me in. Even Coach Tuberville called me at one point and said, you can't wait much longer. You got to get in FEC files. You got to show you're legitimate. So fine. So I kept putting it off, but ultimately the reason I couldn't do it was the political operatives. Now, I know this sounds like I'm blaming something on other people, but I'm not. I'm just telling you the reality that you already know. They told me the clearest and cleanest path to victory, I was running as a Republican in Alabama, was to run, and I'm just going to paraphrase the political operative's words, you need to run against woke Disney. And I could not do it. I could not burn down the place I had worked for the last 13 years that had given me an opportunity as a Birmingham talk show host and use whatever you may think of Disney, and plenty of people have opinions. Disney owns ESPN, for those of you who don't know.
Right.
I couldn't do it. And they said, I had several very prominent people, including two senators, sitting senators, tell me that's your path. I mean, there are many other paths, obviously,
Right.
to win a primary in Alabama, but they thought that was the cleanest path. And it was, my wife one night said to me, can you do that? Can you literally tear down and torch whether you agree or disagree with everything they do, and nobody agrees or disagrees with their parent company? I think I can speak for you as well.
You most certainly can.
And I knew I could. And I just couldn't, in the end, that factor alone, that was at the top of the pyramid, as well as many other things. And secondarily, and maybe even equal, was saying things that I was not comfortable with. You can say whatever you want about me, polarizing, mouth of the South, always ripping coaches. But the one thing I've always wanted to do on a program is bring people together and let them fight within under the tent. And I couldn't get up there and just draw a line and say, I'm for you and I'm against you. It was against everything in every fiber of my body.
Now that it's settled, Paul, how do you feel?
I feel great. I really do. It has been, because this came out a week ago, and then we led to the biggest weekend of the year in college football. So there hasn't been that much time to do teeth gnashing and hand wringing, but I really feel liberated. My wife kept asking me at every step, where are we on the percentile? And I'd get to 40, 50, 60, 70, and it kept back. I just never could say, I'm in. And by the way, I admire politicians who do what they do, but it was not ultimately for me. As much as I would have enjoyed being in Washington, hoping to make a difference, probably not, but hoping, idealistically, that's what I wanted to do. But Major, I can't say anything that you don't already know and haven't reported on 1,000 times, but it's way too toxic. And I had a lot of friends who were in your world tell me, we really would like you to do it. You would be great, but you have no idea what you're getting into.
Did you ever get a call from the president? And if you had, might that have changed things?
That was always a difficult part, because I said in the only interview I gave before when it came out that I was thinking about it, that if the president, I was asked by Clay Travis of Outkick, if the president called and asked you to do it, would you? And I said yes. As we got close to the end, and this is nothing against anyone, we were working on a path to get to the White House, and in the end, I think I was going to meet with him at some point very soon, and I'm not sure I was going to be willing to deal with that conversation, because I think, I don't know whether he would have asked me or not. He may not have. He may have told me I was crazy, but we'll never know.
Well, I've talked to lots and lots of people, Paul, who say when the president asks, the answer is always yes.
Yeah, well, I had a feeling it would be, but that could be one reason why I'm sitting here talking to you right now. But I mean, I think I would have really enjoyed it. But the problem I was going to have, and I'll just go ahead and do a mea culpa here. I've been a journalist my entire career. I usually come to Washington once a year to speak to a group of SEC fans from all over that are connected to politics at the highest level. And we always have a lunch before the event, and it's people that cover the White House. One of my closest friends from college who worked with me at the school paper covers the White House for Reuters. I have other friends there. I can't believe we've never dragged you there since you're an SEC guy. But I don't know if I could have these lunches and not tell the truth. And if I told the truth, I would be the lead item on your
right.
You'd
be in some dimension of hot water. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, let me just offer that I'll be glad to be dragged into the next lunch, Paul. Mizzou is a new arrival to the SEC, but I believe a valued member of the SEC, so that's a good thing. So let's get to the other arena, the arena that fascinates me most and that is part of your international stardom, college football. You've been very critical of Notre Dame this week. Some of my audience is read in on that. Some of it isn't. Summarize for them why you are down on Notre Dame and its attitude about being left out of the college football playoff.
Yeah, I'll spare you how good a football team they had this year because they really weren't that great. They went 10-2. They lost the only meaningful games that they had at the beginning of the season, and that's what cost them getting in the CFP, which is the college football playoff. They went on a run after that, beating a bunch of nobodies. Their best win after that was Southern Cal, which when I was younger was a big game, but it's not anymore because Southern Cal has fallen. So they didn't get in, and part of the reason they didn't get in is that they're not in a conference. And some would say, well, hold on, I watch Notre Dame basketball in the ACC. Well, it's true. Notre Dame is in the ACC conference major in every sport but hockey and college football because they have their own contract with NBC, and they think they're too good. So therefore they don't play in a championship game, which can help you a little bit. And they got left out because Miami and Notre Dame were the final two teams, and Miami beat Notre Dame. I mean, is that a novel idea that you have a head-to-head matchup? One team wins, one loses, but they wouldn't let. But Notre Dame said we belong in there, and their athletic director just went scorched earth. He went on the Dan Patrick Show on Monday and just started making a bunch of threats. He doubled down at a press conference. He actually said something. He said, "No school in college football has ever had a better 10-game record than we have," meaning after the two losses. I was on ESPN this week, and one of the statistical guys already came up with that's not even true. They were the fourth best team this year for that 10-game period. So I don't want to call the guy a liar, but he's a liar. He made threats about the ACC. He made all kinds of threats that he couldn't back up. And even some of his own colleagues, this is not like Washington where everything's a blood sport. Usually people in college football are collegial. That's part of the problem. They're too collegial.
Right.
And he's been really made out to be a fool this week, although he's a very bright guy.
When the Big 12 commissioner goes after you, you know things have broken down a little bit. So,
one thing, his name is Pete Bakava. He was the former head of the PGA. In August of this year, not to get too deep in the Washington weeds, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and Bakava played golf with the president of the United States with the intent of solving all the problems in college football. And now he's one of the biggest problems. Not Trump, but
no.
The Notre Dame athletic director.
No doubt. Bigger picture, Paul. I've loved college football since I left San Diego, where I grew up, and went to the University of Missouri and found out what it was like to be in Middle America and have a wraparound college experience built in the fall around football Saturdays. I didn't grow up with that in San Diego. But there is a great sense of people my age, I'm 63, that college football is not coming apart at the seams, or college athletics, but is being pressurized in ways that make it, if not unrecognizable, less recognizable than it used to be. Conference realignment has shattered or strained long-standing rivalries. There's a geography of it that doesn't make the sense that it used to make. Gambling is now hovering around the edges of it. NIL, which was a long overdue remedy to compensating athletes in certain ways, is having all sorts of distorting aspects to where you stay, how long you stay, and how you're recruited. What would you say the overall state of college athletics is with all the pressures I've just described?
It's chaotic Monday through Friday, but Saturday is sacred. As many problems as we have, you turn on TV on Saturday morning, you watch ESPN, you see the pregame shows. The games are on from noon to midnight, and college football is better than pro football because it's so unpredictable. And they are still 17 to 22-year-olds who make idiotic mistakes. Although it's hard to top what Jalen Hurts did the other night. I think fumbled and intercepted on the same play. But it is such a big business now. And think about this. At the early part of my career, I was an investigative reporter for a newspaper, and I did a story about a player who was wooed by coins out of a Coke machine and gate receipts, which may have added up to a total about $5,000, and it nearly cost him his eligibility. The top player in college football today is probably making $5 or $6 million and has a bunch of commercials, and you don't even blink an eye. Even people, I'm a couple of years older than you. We're used to it by now, even though it's only been legal for 3 or 4 years. The real problem with college football right now is that you have a bunch of well-meaning institutional people who grew up in academia, and they're battling the private equity people at the door.
Right.
I talked to one of the top private equity people in the country the other day, and he told me that college sports is the most undervalued entity in all of the sports world, and they are trying to get their hands on it, and in some places they are getting their hands on it.
What are the implications of that, Paul?
Well, it's going to become even more massive, and I think you mentioned gambling. I mean, I am shocked that we haven't had a major gambling controversy already. There have been 2 or 3 in college athletics over the course of history. Tulane basketball, there Boston College in the late '70s, early '80s. But there will be another one, and it is at that moment in time probably going to be a reckoning. Right now, and I'll try not to be comical here, but every time you interview a president of the university, which I do, and a commissioner, they always say the same thing: we need help. Charlie Baker, former governor,
Right.
head of the NCAA, we need help. And you know where they're all going to help? Washington, D.C., Major. They are saying we can't survive without Congress helping us and bailing us out. Now, please, there's laughter all over the country right now at that prospect, because they can't get anything done in Congress either, in spite of spending tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying fees.
And Paul, when the average person looks at compensation for a head football coach in a Division I football program and looks at LSU, I can't even count how much it's going to be paying out for coaches that are not going to be coaching for LSU. I think it's more than $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
That is a distorting aspect of this economics and state allocations. What do professors get paid? What do students pay for tuition? Can you level set that at all in terms of how we got here?
Well, we got here because we have a lot of people making decisions that they're really not qualified for. And you have an athletic director at whatever school dealing with an agent who, it's not so much that the agent is so smart, it's that the same agent has a monopoly on all the other coaches. There's one agent, Jimmy Sexton with CAA, who has about 70 to 80% of just the SEC coaches and the majority of coaches. So what happens is you deal with him. He might be representing the coach leaving and coming at the same time. Right. I was out in Arkansas one year, and I was praising the head coach. And one of my colleagues was sitting at a table next to an attorney. He came out there with me. And he said, is your friend crazy? Why is he saying all these great things? He said, and my friend said, what do you mean? He said, I used to represent him. I was a local attorney, and he fired me because this same guy I just mentioned said, if you don't hire me, you won't be able to hire any assistant coaches, because I control all the assistant coaches too. So it is incredible what goes on. There have been times when one coach, when one agent represents 3 finalists for a major SEC job. But as far as them making too much money, I want to make a point. In 2007, Nick Saban was hired at Alabama away from the Miami Dolphins. He was paid $4 million a year. The head of the board of trustees at the time said, that is absurd. Why are we paying CEO money to a football coach? That was in 2007. Saban retired 3 years ago, and the president at the time of the university said it was the single best investment in the history of the school. And I dare say, Major, had Nick Saban, if you had paid him what he was worth, he would have been worth about $150 million a year. He brought that much attention and money to the University of Alabama.
Is Lane Kiffin the villain people perceive him to be?
Not really. He's a very quirky, mercurial guy who loves the attention, who I think did a masterful job of masquerading all of this. But he is also a very good football coach. He gave us a prism into how corrupt some of this is. And for those who don't understand, Lane Kiffin is the best coach that Ole Miss has had since 1963, when John Vaught was there during John Kennedy's last year in office. And he bailed out on his team that has finally made that finally made the playoffs and has a chance for a championship. He said, "You know what? I'm leaving because I think I have a better job at LSU." And it was so shocking when he did it 2 weeks ago that it doesn't even sound or feel shocking today. That's how things change so quickly in college football.
Will the college football playoff system be changed without the consent of the Big Ten and the SEC?
No. Listen, you have four major conferences. And these, if I could go back maybe about 50 years to my youth, and you were barely around, to the Godfather trilogy, college football is essentially like the five families of New York. They don't like each other. They try to kill each other, but they do meet once or twice a year for a good Italian meal. And the guy from Staten Island is not going to tell the guy from Manhattan what to do. He stays over there and keeps quiet while Manhattan and Brooklyn control the table and decide who goes to Jersey and who goes into the East River.
Right. And in that analogy, the two most dominant families are the SEC and the Big Ten.
The Big Ten and the SEC, if they so desired, could literally leave everyone else behind and it wouldn't matter. They are so powerful. They are so important. And the reason for that isn't because they have the good schools, and they do, Ohio State, Indiana this year, Alabama, Georgia, schools like that, but they have the television contracts. Those two schools alone have have their hands around the most important television contracts, and everybody else is literally playing at their mercy.
For my audience who may ask this question, I'll do it for them. 12 best teams in college football theoretically should be involved in the hunt for a national championship. How does James Madison and Tulane get on that list?
Let me drop a word that you're probably not familiar with: politics. They, in a move to go to the 12-team playoff a couple of years ago, they had to have a unanimous consent. And the only way to get some of the lesser leagues to vote for the expansion was to give them a seat at the table. So they grandfathered in what's called the group of five. That's Tulane, that's James Madison. These are good schools. Memphis. These are not the elite. So they got one table in this year because the ACC is so chaotic, and they allowed their best team to miss their championship game and had a 5-loss Duke team win, which would not qualify. James Madison, because they were the 5th highest ranked conference champion, was able to sneak into the system. If you think the Electoral College is screwy, just watch college football.
So walk my audience and me through, Paul, from your vantage point, how the college football playoff is going to roll this year. Does Alabama make it to the Rose Bowl against Indiana? And if it does, because I'm going to be at the Rose Bowl, let everyone know ahead of time, can they get past Indiana?
Today, I don't think they can.
I don't either.
I hope I'm out there on the sidelines with you at the Rose Bowl. Indiana is probably the craziest story in college football. In the history of college sports, or in the history of the game, they have the losingest record. And today they are the best team. It's hard for me to explain. You could have never predicted it. And the school that almost made the playoffs probably is in the bottom 5 for one-loss records, and that's Vanderbilt. In New York on Saturday night, 2 of the 4 finalists will come from Indiana and Vanderbilt. There is simply no explanation, because we thought when college football expanded and when NIL came in that only the rich would survive, and when we have 2 of the paupers, not according to endowment, because Vanderbilt's in pretty good shape, but
yes,
but Indiana.
But that goes back to your point a moment ago,
in.
Paul, about the value of making the right choice when you're finding and naming a head football coach, because both in Vanderbilt and Indiana have transformed the visibility and therefore future financing of both programs. I know Vanderbilt doesn't need financing, but it is on the national stage in ways it simply wasn't 5 years ago.
It comes because of one player, Diego Pavia, who Diego Pavia said the other day that he's asking the president, that's President Trump, by the way, for an executive order to get Vanderbilt into the playoffs. And quite frankly, I'm surprised we didn't get one.
All right, Paul, before I let you go, I have this hat in my office every day, the Birmingham Black Barons hat, because I was fortunate enough to go down to Rickwood Field and cover the one and only sanctioned Major League Baseball regular season game there. I fell in love with the place, the history. If you don't know it, my audience, look it up. I did a couple of pieces for CBS Evening and CBS Mornings on that. I want to enlist you, Paul, because you have a lot of ties to Birmingham now and previously, in a crusade of mine to make sure that Major League Baseball at least hears from us, you and I, maybe others, to have a regular season game at Rickwood every single season. Because I believe that field needs to be preserved. The history of baseball needs to be explained to younger generations. And the Negro Leagues, as they were called then, need to be celebrated on an annual basis.
I concur. It is the oldest ballpark in America. It's something that every baseball pilgrimage to. And I loved watching your reporting. And I was not in Birmingham at the time, but I had such pride because Birmingham, as we both know, has seen so many dark days in its history.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that moment in time is really arguably the best moment in Birmingham's history. And I had so much pride to watch you on CBS and to see that game broadcast.
And there's a great historical commingling of white and black players at Rickwood at a time when that wasn't permissible in Major League Baseball. They were there nevertheless, barnstorming and otherwise, the minor league history, everything needs to be about, I think, coming back there every year, making that a Major League Baseball imperative, and maybe you and I can start a lobbying campaign on that behalf.
And I'll tell you the story. You may have heard this before, but I interviewed a number of the old Black Barons. That's what they were called. And I asked one of them once. I said, Willie Mays is, I think he's ranked second or third on the all-time list of greatest baseball players behind Babe Ruth. I think he's second. I said to this gentleman, 85 years old, I said, is Willie? Willie has to be. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. How great was he? He said, well, he was great, but he's not the best player I ever played with. I said, who was the best player? I'm thinking, you couldn't have played with maybe Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, I don't know. He said, Cat Mays. I said, who's Cat Mays? He said, Cat Mays was Willie Mays' father. He was better than Willie. And to your point, Major, some of the greatest players of all time we never saw and really never heard about because they did not have the opportunity.
Exactly. Paul, it's been a complete slice of life for me. This is a Dear Diary day for me. I hope we can do this again in the future. Thanks so much for your time. Love it.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Major.